Briahna Joy Gray.
Her and Norm Finkelstein. I just want you to pay attention to the sexual tension between them.
Welcome back to
Ami's house.
My voice is a little raw. I'm recovering from a lost voice, which is a very hard thing for me, Michael. When my voice is gone, my weapon.
It's an important voice. It's a very important voice. The world misses it, man.
Oh, you're too kind. But you're half trolling, half complimenting. I guess that's the way it is. I know we were texting the other night, and I was just unleashing, and it sounded like I was fired up, which I was, but it just wouldn't. I think the tone of text when you're fired up gives a slightly exaggerated impression of
I made a joke, and I ended up in like an hour and a half long text fight with you. I'm like, I'm just trolling you.
Yeah, so when you're feeling something intense and only texting, it doesn't balance out the emotions, right? It like adds onto it a veneer of intensity that you don't intend. Not that I didn't because we can get into the important stuff, but like the spiritual versus the, right. I like intellectual, rational. I'm a rationalist, that kind of thing. And whenever we talk about religious matters, I tend to be much more skeptical, while you're maybe either less or you're moved by things I'm not. But by the end, I think I understood the whole idea.
It goes back to iRobot. You hated iRobot, and I was like, yo, it's a fine movie. Just let it be a fine movie. It doesn't have to be like, it could just be fine.
It's the same reaction I used to get when I would have very high standards for movies, and everyone would be like, why? It was fine. Why do you hate it? Because I would like yuck people's yum.
Who is this, by the way?
You are a marsupial. You are in the process of giving birth. This is very exciting.
Yes.
There's a baby in your pouch, and eventually, I can't wait. You're a freaking kangaroo.
If a guy wants to do it alone, the baby grows outside the body, which is not
exactly
not something a lot of people knows, and it's a 24-month process.
Yeah. So it's very exciting to eventually bring a child into the world, and we're seeing it in real time. Michael is dad-lifing as we speak. We speak about it on the pod, but this is what real men do. They podcast while parenting. And so the top of a baby's head will be in this podcast. Welcome. Every once in a while, I want you to just go like this while you're thinking. Yes, like a sphinx. Yes.
It's actually wonderful. I don't know what all the moms are complaining about.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
No,
it is nice. It is nice, though.
Is it the hardest job in the world?
It's the hardest job in the world. Plus, we have to both make $1 million.
Yeah.
That's the other.
So let's get into the heavy stuff. I mean, there is a baby in this episode, so it's going to be strange to talk about this. But there's been such disturbing developments on the like media coverage side of things. Mainly, the reason we're assembling this emergency podcast is because you and I attended a really, really cool conference event a couple of weeks ago called Dissident Dialogues, which was started by Winston Marshall, formerly of Mumford & Sons, and he put together this great conference of intellectuals. Richard Dawkins was there, Ayan Hirsi Ali. And one of the panels that was being discussed and assembled there was moderated by Constantine of Trigonometry, talking about Israel and Hamas, and the subject was, is this a just war? It had Ellie Lake and Michael Moynihan on the Israel side, and it had Briahna Joy Gray, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, forgive me, but we can look at it. The main, look it up for me for a second just so we can put his name in so people can find it.
Briahna Joy Gray, and Jake Klein.
Jake Klein. Now, I think Jake Klein made more of the rational arguments and was representing a more reasonable perspective. Unfortunately, you and I had to leave just before that panel because of Shabbos.
It was Friday night.
But it was Friday. But either way, I was there the next night and the next day, and it was the talk of the whole thing, that this was a very heated, contentious debate. And it'll be released in video, I was told, and you'll see what happens, and things got really tense. And it revealed, like, such a, I think, disturbing part of, at least for Briahna. Let's focus on Briahna Joy Gray for a second, because right now, what brings us to this conversation today is that the clips from that conversation are being released and circulated now. And it shows
it's at 79,000 views right now.
Yeah. And it's showing Briahna Joy Gray's basically unpacking like the most contentious parts of the debate. And, you know, one of the things she says that is so naive, idiotic, you know, and to be kind, is when she says that all Hamas really wants is not to kill Jews. They just want to destroy the Jewish state and create something much like we have here in America. And now
I almost lost that one.
Yeah, now Now, I think the other side made the mistake of laughing in her face at that, and in all the back and forth, then Constantine and her are now beefing on, he's calling her DEI Barbie, which
on
is funny,
Twitter, right?
On Twitter, which he never usually does. But, I also was heard that, at the end of the debate, she throws her microphone, storms off stage and says, I'm never doing this again, or something along those lines. She wasn't ready to civilly talk afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And that reveals something very unstable about her position. And it reveals a certain agenda that I find is really malicious about the position she comes from. Because if she can't handle herself at the end of something like that and is blaming the panel now for being racist or her opponents for being racist, it's showing that the intellectual grounds for which she has to stand on are very, very, very fragile. And it's really motivated by something much darker.
Whenever she speaks, I'm always very irritated because she's I only hear her speak on her show and she has control there. So she's able to sort of have this kind of slightly arrogant, slightly condescending tone.
Right.
But no one's at the end of the day, she can cut it off. She can edit it the way whatever. She's in control there. But here she wasn't in control. And I was actually surprised to see how emotional she got.
Mm-hmm. And I have some experience with this. I was on the show and I debated her. To be honest, I was very unimpressed. She really just towed the party line and said everything that was spoon-fed as far as not really thinking and evaluating. What are you really saying here when you're talking about October 7th and calling it into question, calling everything about an October 7th event an allegation, supposedly, calling Hamas resistance movements, but everything Hamas does to Israel is matter of fact, is taken at face value. Every single number is valid. There was a report, and therefore it's the truth. Mm-hmm. But it's only the truth to you when it's against Israel. And I find it so fascinating that it's really curious to me that what really seems to bug her, what really she can't get past, is this idea of a Jewish state, because it's an ethno-state, and that Zionism is an ethno-nationalist movement. And yet, I wonder if Israel was taken over by Hamas as a one-state solution and turned into an Arab or Muslim state, would she go from panel to panel, from interview to interview, and on every single one of her editorials on her show, objecting to that? Because that's also an ethno-state, like all of the ethno-states in the region in the Middle East, like many of the ethno-states in Asia, East Asia, Japan. There are so many that fall under that category that she says not a word about. And yet, she says Hamas would turn it into a one-state solution, much like what we have in the United States. And my whole thing that I'm screaming from the rooftops is, hey, Briahna, what country in the Middle East is most like the United States currently? Mm-hmm. Israel.
Yeah.
So one has to wonder, it's like you want to dismantle the Zionist state to create a one state much like we have in the United States. You're saying destroy Israel and create Israel, except not Jewish.
Right.
I'm like... So one has to wonder what's really motivating and animating this here. And you can only come to the conclusion that the only reason she objects to Israel's existence is because it's a Jewish state. And not that she objects to ethno-states or states having a certain ethnic character or whatever. It's because it's a Jewish character. And that's not a cheap shot. This inability to feel an ounce of empathy or feeling and the dehumanization of Israelis and Jews because it's under this Zionist brand just makes her lack any sense of compassion or humanity. And this is it's the embodiment of the nastiest form of apologists for terrorism, for evil that I've seen in this current conflict. Because there are people that can, like-minded people can debate tactics. Is Israel's military going too far? Is this or that? But she just has a real hard spot, not a soft spot, hard spot for Jewish suffering, tragedy, and death. Mm-hmm. And then it was... Even today, what's happening is there's a clip going around of her talking to the sister of a hostage who asks her to please believe all women. And let's watch her reaction. Ready? I'm going to roll the tape. Can I share a tab with you?
Yeah.
And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right. Thanks for joining. Stick around. More Rising coming up next.
It's so infuriating, especially with... When you take into account the way she's been responding to Constantine on Twitter, calling him a racist, so you can understand that there are stereotypes about groups of people that are damaging. She's playing into all of the anti-Semitic tropes while using the same argument that we use against anti-Semitic tropes against people using it against their own race. So she's like, I'm going to be I can use as many anti-Semitic stereotypes as I want. but you can't use any of the racist stereotypes against me.
She's claiming racism while denying anti-Semitism.
Yeah. It's not like she's saying, all of that is BS. I'm not going to call you a racist, but don't you dare call me an anti-Semite. She's saying, don't call me an anti-Semite, but I will call you a racist. It's just another layer.
I just find her intellectually unimpressive and morally deplorable in what one has to ask themselves, like, what motivates somebody like that? Why would she roll her eyes at somebody asking her to be sympathetic as a sister of hostages? And she goes, ugh.
Yeah.
It's like,
well,
what is that? What is that? Now, because a lot of the dissenting views on Israel and the lack of sympathy for Israel, this comes from different places. Some people are not informed. Some people are misinformed. And then you have like the Max Blumenthals and the Briahna Joy Grays of the world and the Norman Finkels of the world that are celebrating what Hamas is doing. They won't admit it, but they are.
So
notice she doesn't talk about rape allegations and denials now anymore, because a lot of people are coming. So she's just quiet. She doesn't say, I'm so sorry, I was wrong about this. Right. So come out and say it. Just say what you believe. Mm-hmm. Say it. I respect somebody more who comes out and says, yeah, I want Israel destroyed. I don't want there to be a Jewish state. I have a problem with the Jewish state and exclusively a Jewish state. Your actions are speaking way louder than your words. And even your words are disgusting. So I don't know.
I wonder if she's aware of it.
The hypocrisy of the anti-Zionist perspective and the double standard can be summed up in this scenario. Just imagine Israel was a Muslim state, the only one in the world, and that in 1948, 6 million Muslims were slaughtered by oppressive regimes and needed a safe haven. And this one Muslim state was surrounded by Jewish states. And these Jewish states were sending in terrorists to kill Muslims because they were Muslim, with decrees saying we must kill all Muslims. They were kidnapping Muslim children, digging tunnels into Muslimistan or whatever you want to call it, to kill Muslims. How would the world react? It's just like, that's what it feels like to be on the pro-Israel side in this scenario.
I wonder if there's anyone in her life. I mean, her co-host seems to push back a lot, but even so, he was made fun of on the stage where he was like, I'm not your co-host. You can't interrupt me.
Yeah, I'm not your co-host. I'm not Robbie Swab. You can't
really
interrupt
funny. Me. A question I want to ask her is something that someone brought up over the Shabbos table, which was, she likes to talk a lot about the war of return. But
the right of return. The right of return. But what isn't spoken about in that is, so then what rights do the Israelis then get? Once the Palestinians can come back, what rights do the Israelis get? Can the Israelis then go into the West Bank and start developing without permits as much as they want? Can they just take over the entire West Bank, buy out Arab villages, buy out their homes, start building huge, Jewish settlements? They wouldn't be settlements anymore. It's not even thought of that there are people there already with rights there. It's only thought of from their perspective. And it's only thought of in the sense of like, here's the thing. Like, if the right of return happened in the way she desires it, that she would seem and deem just, that she would deem as just, and what followed was the slaughter of Israelis in the streets in Israel and the expulsion of the Jewish population there, she would support it. Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind, her and those who are like-minded to her would say this is justice. She would support it. What nobody realizes that the reason there were these expulsions and displacement were because the surrounding Arab countries decided to wage a genocidal war against a Jewish state that was formed. So she denies, and also like, this ancestral claim to Israel, the Jewish roots of Israel, the Jewish history and identity that Israel is central to. She seems to just say, for someone who claims to talk about indigenous rights, people who still have the keys to their home. I'm like, yeah, dig under the home and you find Jewish coins. As Douglas Murray would say, we could play this game all day. Whatever. I like doing that. But like, are you someone who believes in indigenous rights or not? Or you only believe in indigenous rights if it's not the Jews?
Again, also, I think you and me pick up on, and I think any Jew who would watch it probably would pick up on it. It's not even just what she says; it's how she says it. It's her eyes, it's her posture, it's the emotion that everything she says is carried with. Like, just my guts are just like, I feel like this person doesn't have the best intentions here.
No.
And it's like a little bit scary. I mean, I've said this before, but I feel like she's angling for some sort of position on a new media front where people start talking more and more openly about how the Jews are a problem.
Right.
Or right now it's couched in all these terms like anti-Zionist, but
now I don't feel bad throwing out those terms loosely, that she's just operating from basically an anti-Semitic premise, because she throws out racist like you wouldn't believe, that's completely unfounded. But her glaring double standard, her denial of Jewish suffering, that anytime we talk about atrocities on October 7th, it's propaganda, it's minimized, it's allegations, it's alleged, and any report from the Hamas health ministry is taken at face value. It's fully whatchamacallit. This is corroborated.
Yeah.
And I'm like, then why do all the claims about rape? What do you consider corroboration? Is the confessions of the terrorists themselves not enough? Is the fact that women have come forward not enough? Suddenly it's convenient for you to completely deny all tragedy and atrocity when it's perpetrated by Hamas against Israelis and Jews. There's almost like this sense that she feels like a sense of justice from it, like they deserve it. And if there was a right of return, and that what followed was not a peaceful, sovereign Palestine with the minority rights protected, like it exists now as an Israeli country, a Jewish state that exists currently is the one that protects the minorities within it, the Arab population within it. A Hamas-run or Palestinian-run free Palestine would not be free at all. Would she object to it? I think she would celebrate it.
Right.
And that is the moral bankruptcy of her and those like her, that they don't care what happens after the fact. They argue for a state that is Israel, but because Israel's Jewish, somehow it's wrong. Like there's no other explanation for it. They're arguing what she says was Hamas doesn't want to kill all Jews, even though they've kind of sort of explicitly said it and written it and have said it more times. They don't really mean that. What they really want is to establish America. That's what exists right now. A little mini America, Western country that, yes, is a Jewish state for good reason, because of all the claims we could make that basically make Israel legitimate as a Jewish state and make Israel legitimate as a Western state that exists right now. And yet she's arguing for it, but doesn't want it to be Jewish. Has no problem with Muslim countries existing, Asian countries existing, other kinds of ethno-states. It's just Israel. And so I hate throwing around the anti-Semitic accusation lightly, but this seems so glaringly obvious to me.
Can I show you a video of her and Norm Finkelstein? And I just want you to pay attention to the sexual tension between them, okay? Right?
Yes.
Let's see here. Here, can you see this?
Yeah. I wonder if I can hear it. Turn the sound on.
Here we go.
So Israel is presenting all of these very sophisticated images to prove that there is a Hamas command and control center under Al-Shifa Hospital.
Up at some point.
And
Hold on.
Every
This is good.
military operation is here, but they're using it for
Look at that.
tunnels. So what?
Hold on. Let's watch it.
The logic is any resources Hamas invests in military resistance becomes a subtraction from resources that could have been invested for the civilians.
No, I like this.
And given that it's a very poor place, the bottom line is there won't be a resistance.
She's not even listening.
Because you will, by virtue of the poverty of the place, have to invest all your resources
Might be bored.
in
This is good.
the civilian infrastructure and so forth. So what they're really saying is, why is Hamas resisting?
Right. That's such a good point.
So that's what they don't like.
That's such a good point. And it is, I will say, hearing Americans arguing that point, it's pretty rich given the state of our own domestic population.
I was going to say, no, we all complain about a bloated military budget.
Bigger than the next 9 combined, including Russia and China and all of our biggest enemies.
Right.
Enemies.
But
So proud of herself.
and you say in the face of the fact that there are all these homeless people.
Correct.
Why isn't the money being used for the homeless?
Hold on.
Rather than using it for bloated.
So what's his argument?
But it's a very rare person
I don't know.
who would say
I'm not sure.
that unless all of the people's needs are met, we shouldn't invest 1 cent in the military. even the
I'll
most.
say it.
But you recognize.
I take your point.
Yes, you recognize that would be considered a very extreme argument.
Right.
But that's exactly what's being said about Hamas.
Can you do
that
her
if there are any civilian needs that go unmet,
they're on a date right now.
I know.
She's like, "Oh, Norm." You know what's very strange about her as a character, as a person, and we're getting personal about it, but her face is really reveals so much. Like
that's what I'm saying.
She's just like.
Yeah. She looks.
His argument was really weak there. I didn't really get the whole gist of it, but
no. Well, it's there. There's a camaraderie there about. It's not. It's the feeling they get when they make the argument together that makes them giddy. Like it feels like there's this commonality of cause, but it doesn't. It feels so nasty to me.
Yeah.
They're really bonding about something. What is it that they're really bonding over?
And to me, if I'm being honest, I think what animates them is not creating a free Palestine. It's destroying a free Israel.
I agree.
If Israel if Israel, as long as Israel is destroyed, what happens after does not matter. Yeah. What happens to Palestinians does not matter. The offense is a prosperous Jewish state in a region. Into the Islamic world, it's a Yahud Jewish state on what they think is supposed to be Muslim. And they do not care. Just like when Israel pulls out of Gaza in 2005 and Fatah gets slaughtered by Hamas, they don't care. Yeah. They don't care the Palestinians suffer at the hands of Hamas. It's only at the hands of Jews.
I mean, Dr. Einat Wolf says this a lot, but you never once mentioned, you keep speaking for the Palestinians about what they want. Find me a Palestinian voice from Gaza who has said publicly, I want two states. Or I want to peacefully coexist with the Zionist state. It's only them saying it.
They don't even say that.
They never said that.
They agree with Hamas. They want Israel
destroyed. I know. They're advocating for this people that doesn't exist. And
for this ideology that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And what they use is
they're giving the Palestinian cause a justifiable sort of sanitized Western voice to be like, no, you can't say you want to kill the Jews. This is how you say it.
Yeah,
we'll talk for you.
Resistance
over here.
It used to. I remember how the language morphed. It used to be terrorist, then militant. Now militant is sort of said Hamas militants, fighters. Now it's resistance movement, which means we're resisting some sort of oppression. Right. Like the evil's over here and we're the good. And that's what she basically has endorsed and embraced, resistance.
Yeah.
So this is when people say that I'm being, or you and I, or whatever, whoever's talking about this are being hyperbolic or hysterical about the state of morality in the West. To me, Briahna Joy Gray and those like her embody and those most perverse ideas of the left, of the state of media, of the coverage on this topic, and the complete denial of the humanity, the delegitimization of Israel, of Israelis, of Jews. As long as they're coded with the word Zionist, you can basically say and act the same way. You just have to use that buzzword. That's your code word to say what you want about it and be completely unfeeling to them as human beings. And I think on the counter, look, like I said yesterday on Instagram, something very basic. I said, every time Israel attacks, it's trying to kill terrorists. And every time Hamas attacks, it's trying to kill civilians. Now, does Israel kill civilians? Yes. Do Hamas sometimes kill combatants? Yes. But if we're just talking about intention and what people really want, there's such a fundamental difference in intention. And again, it's just so glaring to me. Like the idea, could anyone ever imagine Hamas apologizing for a rocket landing in the wrong spot in Israel?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Issuing a statement like, we will look into this. This was not intended for that school. No. They call the school fighters. They call the babies fighters.
Yeah.
And that's not what Israel does. And when Israel does call Hamas terrorist animals, people like Briahna Joy Gray in the West say, oh, they're applying it to everybody. And when Hamas explicitly calls all Israelis colonizers, they deny that.
Well, one thing I think we can learn from the Palestinian movement is is just to say simply, we don't want the land because we may be a better country and we may be more like you, America, but that's not what we want. We want it because it's ours, and that's it. And we're gonna keep it, and we're gonna take it, and we're gonna live here because it's ours. And I mean, that's what they're saying, and it seems to kind of resonate.
Oh, that we have to play on that battle verbally?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think you win.
Like
I don't think. Yeah, because I don't think you retain the moral high ground by compromising your integrity and your moral stances.
You think we have the? Yeah, I don't think most people would say we have the moral. You know what? I take that back though. I was about to say most people wouldn't say we have the moral high ground now, but it's really just a vocal few on Twitter. And I think most people probably would say if you went around the country and asked that Israel has the moral high ground. So
yeah, and I would say that like I don't think you compromise your actions and your assertions, but you don't water down your morality to the ones that you're to the regimes you're trying to fight against. Mm-hmm. The whole point is you're asserting your moral superiority. We are not like you. We do believe in human rights and sovereignty and dignity and decency. Like we don't go and have gratuitous violence. Well, I don't think Israel should not grab Palestinian civilians and drag them through the streets of Tel Aviv and cheer. Mm-hmm. That's not what Israel does, and we would never endorse such a thing. Mm-hmm. The whole point is the reason we retain the moral high ground is because we don't celebrate death, we celebrate life. And we have to commit to that.
Quick question for you, and then we'll end there. Mm-hmm. What would you say the difference between Briahna and Candace is? Because you're comfortable coming here and talking about this with Briahna, but you seem to have you think Candace is in a different sort of league. Candace Owens, I mean.
I would say I think Briahna knows better. Mm-hmm. I think maybe there's a phrase, maybe Candace doesn't care enough to know, and I think, well, either you don't care enough to know or know enough to care. And I'm not sure how to apply that here. I'm just saying that term loosely because it's an interesting phrase. Yeah. I think Briahna knows better and is choosing hate and disdain. Mm-hmm. I think in Candace's case, there's a bit more of a lack of awareness or knowledge on the issue. And so she's going with her gut and like just kind of firing into the abyss. And so certain statements come off as crazy offensive and she's responding to general pressure. If people react a certain way to this, it's like, why can't? So there's she's provocative. Candace is provocative and will say things to demonstrate that she can say them. Mm-hmm. And she's operating from a place of like responding to control and this pressure of feeling controlled. So I'm going to say something provocative. Why can't I talk about why the Nazis were like the Germans that were treated badly after World War II? I'm like, I guess you could talk about that, but it says something very odd and bizarre about where your priorities are. Mm-hmm. But you could. Right. Is it animated by hate or is it animated by a need to push back against a sense of pressure and speech control? I think it's more the latter. I think her instincts, that doesn't mean she's not capable of saying anti-Semitic things or emboldening anti-Semitism. I think she does and is. But where it comes from is a place of responding to where the pressure is. And right now, obviously, post-October 7th, the pressure is to talk about the Jewish community delicately. Mm-hmm. And so rather than being sympathetic to that cause, Candace has said, okay, that's not me. I'm not going to be delicate because that's cancel culture. That's censorship. That's controlling my speech. And in doing so, she's taking the actions of, and she's contradicting her own principles by taking mm-hmm. the actions of certain nefarious Jews and saying this must be something else going on because she's maybe conspiratorially minded and has that kind of temperament. But hate, animosity and hate and disdain, I don't think motivates Candace in the way that it motivates Briahna. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, and that's where I think psychologically the two are very different. Right. And Briahna is investigating in some capacity, so she has the capacity to learn more about this issue. Candace is not a traditional journalist in that sense. She's commenting, she's going with her gut about what certain things. She's curious, mm-hmm. and she's ending up with a lot of the wrong conclusions, in my opinion, and drawing a lot and connecting a lot of the wrong dots, and not using a lot of critical thinking where I think it calls for it. But I think Briahna could use critical thinking and is willfully either ignorant or willfully naive or malicious. She wants something out of this. She really does object. She's not just curious.
I think she already knew what she wanted to say before October 7th, and then October 7th happened, and she went, here's an opportunity to do it.
Yeah. So it comes from a darker place, I think, from her, as evidenced by, I don't think Candace would ever interview the sister of a hostage, and roll her eyes at that person. I just don't think she would ever do that. If she was talking to somebody, she would go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that." Yeah. And she might say that. She would say that to a Palestinian too. Yeah. I would say, if we're just being honest, I could not imagine Candace rolling her eyes at the sister of someone who's been taken hostage by Hamas.
Yeah. No, it's she's the sister. The Israelis have been dehumanized, and I think and so she doesn't have a problem rolling her eyes.
And Candace had a conversation with Dave Smith before. She had a conversation with Dave Smith where she said, and even Dave Smith, who I disagree on vehemently about this, has said, "You do no service to the case for a Palestinian state or cause by saying." By ripping down posters or saying October 7th was justified in any way. It wasn't, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about the other stuff. Mm. And so they at least have a little bit of a moral consistency there. And even Candace has said on her show, how horrible that is. And I don't support Hamas and all these other things. Now, I think she draws other weird conclusions that are bizarre and should be confronted and challenged for sure. And I look forward to that. But different than what's going on here with the Max Blumenthals, the Briahna Joy Grays, and the Norman Finkelsteins of the world, who have a weird, deep, dark motivation.
I'm going to throw a crystal ball in there too.
Yeah. Same idea. Right. Anyway, pleasure unpacking this with you, Michael. My voice is still a little sore.
Yeah.
And Brianna's welcome on the show anytime.
I feel like an idiot for naming her Briahna, in September.
Give her a little pet. Give her a little pet. Yes. The reveal at the end of this episode is that the daughter on your chest right now is named Briahna. She's welcome on the show anytime.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you've made it this far, we want to let you know that Ami's House is now on Patreon. We love doing extra content, bonus footage with every episode. The best way to support us is to head on over to Patreon, become a guest, and support the show for $5 a month.
If you like watching Ami cut me off, Patreon is
Patreon.com/Ami's House for bonus content. Thanks so much for your support and become a guest.